Welcome back to STEAM Spot, Think STEAM Career Podcast, where we explore the evolving world of science, technology, arts, and mathematics. And don't forget the engineering, how those specific academic and career pathways intersects, and bring into focus the underrepresentation of Blacks, Indigenous, and people of color in STEAM collegial programs and career. Today, we have the privilege of hosting a distinguished guest whose expertise sits at the critical crossroad of literacy and STEAM education. I am thrilled to introduce Dr. Gwendolyn Bartle LaVert, PhD, an international literacy specialist, an international literacy trainer of leaders and educators, writer, researcher, coach, mentor, cognitive mediator, and advocate for transformative education. Dr. LaVert has dedicated her career to elevating literacy standards, particularly liberating the minds for literacy proficiency among underrepresented communities. Dr. LaVert has served as principal of Francis Slocum Elementary School in Marion, Indiana, and as leadership and literacy expert in the Middle East, where she has led curricular improvement and professional development initiative and aligned those efforts with the district progress as professional learner communities. Dr. LaVert has been an educator since 1974 and has experience as a teacher, district literacy specialist, district administrator in various school settings. The schools she has worked in range from predominantly low-income schools serving minorities to some of the most affluent and high-performing schools, including High Park Elementary School in Texarkana, Texas. She has been an assistant professor at the College of Education at Indiana Wesleyan University, where she taught foundation of early literacy and literacy in the content area. She's also taught graduate courses in leadership and led several master's cohort groups. Dr. LaVert is an Indiana Administration Association member and the Indiana Department of Education Lead for Literacy. Her strong belief in developing highly effective school responsive to students' cultural learning and cognitive style has resulted in marked improvement in various schools. She has presented throughout the United States on topics ranging from developing a culture of high expectation to implementing support system for schools who are struggling academically and behaviorally, and she has worked with educational leaders to make curricula more relevant to minority students. Dr. LaVert received a bachelor's degree in elementary education and a master's in literacy from Texas A&M University. Her doctoral in educational leadership is from Indiana State University. Wow. Dr. LaVert strongly believes in the mantra that leaders are readers, championing the cause that every student, irrespective of their background, deserve access to quality literacy education as the foundation for success in life and STEAM field. Today, she is here to share her insight, experience, and perhaps the most important thing that is dear to me, her vision on literacy education and its nexus to STEAM education and how they go hand in hand in creating a pathway for opportunities for every learners. Let's welcome Dr. Bartle LaVert to STEAM Spark Think STEAM Career Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. LaVert.
Welcome. Thank you. This is a privilege to be here today. I'm very excited about talking about something that I truly, truly love, and that is literacy and making a difference, not only here in the United States, but all over the world.
Thank you so much. You're well accomplished and you have done so much. Love to have been, I guess, I would have loved to have been one of your teachers when you were a principal in one of your schools. I will have learned a lot from you. Uh,
So much. Thank you so much. I just believe that when I was in first grade and I didn't realize I was having difficulty. I just thought that school started when I left school. That's when school started for me. That's when the spiritual part of me, that's when the human part of me came into place. And through my parents, through my church, through my community, that's where it started. And I always said that when I became a teacher, I said this in first grade, that I wanted to be the best teacher that I could possibly be to make a difference.
wow. And you continue to make a difference up to today. Up to today. What a great foundation you have, and what a great vision that you have for yourself because you've surpassed. I'm very sure you've surpassed your expectation. As, at least I will say that your students are fortunate, to have had you as the mentor, as the teacher, as the principal, and your teachers definitely have grown to be able to make a difference in the life of all of these students. Well, thank you today. So what's the issue? The issue that inspires tonight's conversation concerns the challenge and the potential disparity in literacy education in underrepresented community, and also the nexus of literacy between literacy and STEM education. As you know, Dr. LaVert, literacy is a challenge in our community. So if I could start with this conversation, with this question, what is the state of literacy in underrepresented among students in marginalized community?
Okay. Well, first, let me just give you a definition of literacy.
Okay.
I start off with that literacy is the ability to read, write, speak, think, respond critically, listen in a way that lets us communicate effectively and make sense of the world. So here's the big world out there, and we have to learn how to make sense of the world. Well, most students, when we look at the big five of education, what is important in reading, we have to look at phonological awareness, we have to look at phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and the fifth one is comprehension. That's the big five. So kids have to go through those four hurdles before they can really get into that. We want to start at kindergarten, but to really get into it, they have to understand the critical part of it, the critical thinking, the processing of it, the analyzing of it. And if they don't have these four basic ones before they get to the comprehension, pretty much they are lost.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look at our schools today, especially our low performing children, and believe it or not, we call them marginalized kids because we're looking at African American, Hispanic, low income. We're looking at all of that. But if we go into the suburbs and find some of the kids, African American children or marginalized children who come from, who are living in the suburbs, they don't do as well.
Hmm.
quietly as it may be kept, they still don't do well. So it's an ethnicity thing or an equity gap that's going on, and it follows them whether they stay in the urban schools or whether they go into the suburbs. It's the same thing if it's a ethnic gap, the same thing. But when we look at marginalized children in urban schools, we find that poverty is a major thing that causes this. If I'm looking at my data and it's saying that this comes from the policy circle, it says in the United States, 54% of American adults, 54% of American adults read below the equivalent of a sixth grade level. Lower literacy rates directly correlate to high unemployment rates,
Yes.
reduced income, and a lack of education themselves. There's so many parents who have not gone past 8th grade.
Wow.
So when we look at that, that's a major problem. Then I'm going to go back and I want to say a quote by Frederick Douglass. He says, once you learn to read, you will be free forever. Mm-hmm. So if these are the equivalents of why they're not doing well, higher unemployment, reduced income, all of those, then how can they catch up? If their parents are in this, how can their children move without a lot of intensive intervention? How can their children move? Now, there was something else I wanted to tell you that in high school, let's see. It says here that 16% of African-American youth are proficient in reading by the time they reach high school. Now, they always say proficient, like 16% is really good.
16% is very low.
We look at it, that means that 94% of high school kids who reach high school are not reading at grade level proficiency, 94%.
It's quite a lot.
So that's a lot that's going on. And so if you look at our definition somewhere down the line, reading, writing, so they're probably reading and writing, but not at the proficient level, 94%. But then we move into that thinking, responding critically, communicating effectively, writing effectively. All of those things impact how successful they're going to be. So by 8th grade, let's think, by 8th grade, if we look at the data and see where they are, then what needs to happen from 8th grade through 12th grade? Because they're not getting any of those advanced classes because they can't read.
Yes, all right.
That I've talked about in my definition falls under math, science, social studies, all of those areas, reading falls under it. Because if they're still having problems when I think about reading, I think research is very important. So when I think about reading, I'm thinking about they can look carefully at words and within words. They can look at beginnings and endings. They can look at small words and big words. They look for parts that they know, thinking of other words which are stimuli. So that's called decentration. They're holding all of these different things in their brain. So if they haven't been taught how the brain reads, and they're lost right there. They're looking at rote and memorization. So between kindergarten and 8th grade, this is what's happening to them. Think about what makes sense for word choice and meaning to the text as a whole. So they're looking at the words, but they're looking at the words within the text and understanding the meaning of those words, and then moving on to try to figure out what is the author really saying to me. Think what kind of word might fit in the text, and if it sounds right, they must do it all simultaneously. So if there's some defects between phonological awareness, phonics, and words and fluency means that you're going to be moving automatically through a text. So right at that point, they're already lost.
Wow. So here is the challenge. you mentioned something about the parents earlier. The parents are not as literate. So what are we to do? Where do we begin? I mean, if the parents are not literate to be able to help, and
Mhm.
the schools are underfunded, so where do we go from here? You really have said a lot about, the impact of literacy to, the ability to function or to succeed in terms of jobs, at least good paying jobs. So what do we do?
Well, let me just tell you this. Of adults with low literacy,
Yes.
10% of them receive support services, such as adult literacy programs. 10%. So if they're not going to these services, they are just in. I had a parent last year. I worked as an interventionist in a school because I'm writing my new book called Who Says I Can't?
Mm.
A 4-year plan to close the gap before fourth grade. That's my new book that's coming out with Solution Tree Publishing.
Congratulations. Congrats.
And so in that book, I talk about, I think storytelling is so important. But
Mm.
girl came to school in fourth grade. She had spent second and third grade at home. Her parents were in low-paying jobs. What they could not have one job. The mom had 3 jobs. She did DoorDash. She did the pizza place, and then there was another one that she did. So she was never at home. So this was during the pandemic. So she was at home by herself. No one was there. Grandma lived there. Grandpa lived there. They were all out working. The father, when he came home, he had to go to sleep so he could get up the next day. And then the mom came home and slept. And then she went to the 3 jobs. The father had 3 jobs. So now, when would they have time to go to those support services? And there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kids in the house. This is one family. All of them live in the same house. That's her mother's sister lived there, and their 2 brothers lived there. The grandmother, the grandfather, the husband or boyfriend, and then the sister had a boyfriend that was in and out, and she was pregnant. Out of that 10% that are going, we have what, 90% that are not going. So what do we do about it? I think one of the things is that, and what I did in my last low performing school as principal, I had sessions for parents to come to. I've spent 80, as a principal, I spent 80% of my time in classrooms or working with parents. Now, in order for a principal to do that, you have to have a strong front office staff, a secretary who is par excellent, where you can spend 80% of your time out in the classrooms, then talking with parents, afternoons training parents, going to the local Y, going to the Boys and Girls Clubs. I was able to stop the kids from just going to the Boys and Girls Club and just play. Parents who were going in there to help. We also helped them with their work. One of the things that bothered my parents was the fact that they hated going into the classrooms to talk with the teachers. So when we had PTO meetings, we didn't go into the classrooms anymore. They said, one parent said, it just reminds me of the time I was in the classroom and I was not successful.
Mm.
So we did everything outside, or we did it in the hallways. We did not go into the classroom because I did surveys to figure out, okay, so what is it that's causing these parents not to come? And then this may be terrible, but I said I had a partnership with the Westland Church, and they gave turkeys away every Thanksgiving. And sometimes they were giving 2 and 3 turkeys away, hoping to get the parents there. And we found out that they were only coming to get the turkeys. And there were about 4 other places in town that was giving turkeys also.
Wow.
Persuaded them to stop giving the turkeys and have different kinds of activity that would force the parents and the kids to work together. We had one mom who learned how to read through her child. She couldn't go to the grocery store, but every afternoon when her first grader got home, she helped her with her reading. Everything she learned, then her mom learned the same thing. So there are ways that we can look to see what's happening and intervene, and also make them feel comfortable. Like, it's not your fault. Sometimes I think 90% of the instruction is at a level that is too fast for kids to grasp it. And so they don't understand the system. If it was back in the day, it was mostly rote and memorization and Jack and Janet books with characters that didn't look like them.
Mm.
So that's the problem. So
So,
just a few things that we did to help bring parents in.
okay, so yeah, I also remember when I was teaching in middle school, those are some of the strategies that we utilized to bring the parents into the building. As a matter of fact, a lot of our parents, um, English is not their first language. So they are also parents who are immigrant to the United States. So we often, have session with them in the cafeteria instead of the classroom. But the biggest problem, but that was when I was teaching middle school. That was when the No Child Left Behind was pretty big, and there was a lot of money back then. So, but now I often wonder, is there money somewhere? I mean, to help, especially with, after school program, for similar programs such as that, to be able to help parents, especially the parents who are, immigrants themselves, and of course, English is not their first language. Uh, do you know if there is enough money, I mean, to go around to different schools? I mean, is that part of the equity issue? I mean, lack of resources with marginalized community?
I think, let me tell you another thing that's really, really great. My brother-in-law is a pastor of a church in Indiana,
Okay.
and for 40 years. From the church budget, he started an after school reading program, and it moved over into the summer, and the church funded that.
Okay.
And so that's after school program and summer program led to a charter school.
Mm.
And that charter school was a public charter school. So I was the founder and wrote the proposal for it, and I became the curriculum director. My sister became the school leader.
Okay.
And we had funding from the state because it was a charter school, but a public charter school.
Mm.
And hundreds of thousands of dollars for that.
Mm.
Understand now, the church that I go to now, they have a program, but
Okay.
they several thousands of members.
Mm.
And that is a vision of the pastor to have that school there. So there can be monies now from the state. I notice now that more money is coming out. Now, there was a superintendent who had many times when the money comes through, the superintendents have to have the vision for that. And then they can provide extra help for kids outside of in the community to bring that. But there was a superintendent that my sister and I knew, and the State Department was going to give close to $1 million, but they had to be connected to an elementary school.
Okay. Okay.
And I hate to say this because it's kind of sad. That's why I'm not saying where it's from.
Mm.
But, when they went to the superintendent with the proposal, He said, not at this time.
Why?
He just said, well, we're just going to wait maybe another time. And he knew the urgency of it. So whomever is doing this must must feel the urgency to want to do something. Now you're a superintendent of a low socioeconomic community.
Mm-hmm.
And when someone comes to you and say, is it possible if we could use one of your schools to house the tutoring? And they say, well, maybe another time.
Mm-hmm.
My girlfriend has in Virginia, Dr. Wesley is the pastor of her church. And she started, along with me helping her, she started an after school program. But they give millions of dollars to HBCUs. The president of the HBCU comes to Virginia and they give millions of dollars all the time. But like I said, people have to have hearts for it in order for it. Because
so there is money, there is resources out there. So it's all about the vision, the passion, the desire for leadership actually to move the needle to help. So that actually, I wanted to change the subject a little, then we're going to come back to this. So how does early literacy development, I want to go back to this. How does early literacy development impact students' ability to engage with and succeed in STEAM subject? Can you provide some example of how foundational literacy skills help students understand complex STEM concept? I mean, you mentioned comprehension, critical thinking, paying attention. I mean, recognizing text patterns. I mean, that is critical in STEAM, right? In STEM, right?
yes.
So, do you want to? So, how does, you know, how does that not having all those basic foundational skills, how does that or will that impact?
So the National Reading Panel came out several years ago with this hierarchy of reading skills. And now we're into the era of the science of reading. And we're saying that kids are not doing well. One of the reasons that many kids are not doing well or what they need is systematic, explicit instruction of literacy. So it has to be systematic. And it has to be so systemic that kids are learning as they move through the process. So the first stage is phonological awareness. And I think that I said, look carefully at words and within words and look at the beginnings and endings, look at small words and big words, look for parts that they know, thinking of other words which are similar, think about what makes sense for word choice and meaning to the text as a whole. So if you look at the first part, they've got to hear, not just see the letters, but they've got to hear the sounds. And so you're building an auditory pathway because we know that the reading was not built into the brain. Kids are able to learn on their own when from birth on, they kind of learn through looking and listening. But when we move into phonological awareness and this auditory sounds, that has to be explicitly and systematically taught. They just don't catch it. So when kids come to school and the teacher has not gone through this process, let me show you this part. The brain is not hardwired for reading. The natural connection needed for reading must be built through successful instructional practices. So what is that saying? A little boy that I tutor now, in first grade, he had 4 first grade teachers in 1 year.
4 teachers.
4 teachers. The first teacher got really sick, so she left. And they got another teacher who was experienced. She stayed there a few months and got another job. They promoted her. Then another teacher came and she stayed until that first teacher who they never saw came back and and kept them for the rest of the year. So she came back a few months before the end of the school year. So he's had 4 teachers. And so we go back and say the brain is not hardwired for reading. The neural connections needed for reading must be built through successful instructional experiences. Mm-hmm. And if that does not happen, because when they're the cognitive skill to rewire the brain is that rapid auditory processing at the speed of sight. I need to be able to look into words and see small words, see big words, but see small words, see patterns. The brain looks for patterns all of the time. So that must be seen. Now, when we look at phonological awareness, they have to hear it. It has to be built in. So awareness of gross differences in words. I see a cat. How many words did you hear? I see a cat. 4 words. Put your finger on the dot that would be cat. Instead of cat, give me another word. I see a dog. I see a rat. And then awareness of rhyme. Right. Jack Hill went up the hill, and then segmentation, starting off with compound words. Then we go into seeing it. So we finished with the hearing. Then we move into seeing it. So awareness of initial consonants, those that can be strung out, like those can be strung out. And alliteration, baby Bob. Baby Bob sat on the bed. Baby Bob. So they're hearing the alliteration, awareness that 2 words begins with the same sound. And then we move into that last part there, awareness of segmentation of onset and rhyme. Means that there are 37 rhymes that makes up 500 words. So if I know cat and it has the rhyme at, then I know bat and sat and rat. So then we move into the sight words. So by this stage, by December, if we've covered level 1 and level 2, our kids are reading decodable text.
Yes.
So if they miss out on all of that, they are lost. And it's not in a systematic process. Teachers are moving from whole group to small groups. And we call it tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, one-on-one. And if a child is slow in this area, then the teacher, they need to have at least 2 reading sessions. 2 reading sessions a day where that teacher is going over these things that I just talked with you about. Then finally, this is the most complex, which is phonemic awareness, the manipulation of sounds. They are able to segment, pull words apart, and put them back together. For example, if I say hat, and I want you to make hit, in your mind, you've got to take the a out and put the I in there. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
You're manipulating the sound. So if I have mat and I want you to make hat, in my mind has to become consciously aware, awakening the minds of your kids in order to do this, because you're moving in and out and the brain is helping you move in and out. But if kids miss out on this, then they're lost.
Yeah, I can see that.
That they're totally lost. And so then these are the 37 rhymes that make up 500 words. And then these are the 100 sight words. Some can be sounded out and some cannot, but they have to know these at the speed of sight. Wow. And then from there, we move into the lesson plan. So this is a lesson plan that the teacher would have to take them through. They've got to read it, reread it, discuss, react to it, and then they move into the coding it, applying it again, and then how do we transfer this into books? So we get them into books right away. So this is the first step that many of our kids miss out on. And all of this should be mastered by the end of first grade.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
That's why these foundational skills are so important for our kids.
And the challenge for the marginalized group, as you have mentioned, is number one, parents, I mean, the school, the access to having adequate experienced teachers or
Yes,
dedicated teachers
yes.
is one of the major challenge. Are there other challenges that causes this kind of interruption or?
The major thing is professional development.
Okay.
We've
So
had
are you saying that some of the teachers are not skilled enough to be able to, or are you also saying that, uh, you know, bringing the students, um, to fluency, it's not just the work of the literacy or the language teachers,
it's
it's
the work
the
of everybody.
everybody. Okay.
Everybody. I worked as a district literacy specialist, and
Okay.
the superintendent was a literacy specialist.
Okay.
And the superintendent said, everybody here
Mm.
will be a teacher of reading. So he had everybody from the 4-year-old program up to the high school coaches.
Mm.
And I remember one coach saying, I've never liked reading. Know how to read. Now I was a little confused
Yeah.
because he was a football coach,
Mm.
and he had to help his quarterback understand the plays. Is that right?
I get it.
Football, but the quarterback is the person who runs the team, and he has
Right.
to know the plays. And if he doesn't know how to know the plays, he's fired. You know.
Absolutely.
So he said, well, but he wasn't looking at what he was doing was a part of reading, making the right decisions, critical thinking at the speed of sight. The back
Mhm.
couldn't say, well, I want you to go over there. And all of a sudden he's standing up there looking, and the boys are waiting for him to tell them where to go, and he has no idea. But the main point, the main point is that we've got to train teachers, and we have to have an instructional leader who understands literacy and spend at least 80%, I would say 70 to 80% of the time going into classrooms and being able to analyze what the teacher is doing, is or is not doing.
Yeah.
So number one, professional development. And many of them will say, well, I have plenty of professional development. But then I've
Yes.
come to say, well, that professional development did nothing for me. So what I did was I developed a survey, and all the things for our diagnostic tests, they cover these 5 stages, this hierarchy. If you're doing I ready or I read diagnostic tests, which most districts are doing, then they cover all of these. And then they have an analysis of where kids fall within this frame. And so when you look at the data, have data walks with your teachers, then you say, these are the skills that's keeping our kids from moving towards proficiency. These are the skills that put our kids in the yellow. These are skills and strategies that put our kids in the red. And if this is going on, then you have a differentiated professional development. So I had a schedule that said, on Monday, we're going to train on this. On Friday, or Wednesday, we're going to train on this. If you feel that you are proficient in these areas, then there's no need for you to come, but we will be coming to your classroom to observe it.
Good. So one of the challenge that I think for some teachers that are not language teachers, especially in STEM, they actually may say, well, I have to teach my discipline. For me to try to integrate, the literacy skills into, my curriculum, that it's going to cause me not to be at pace.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I can see that. I mean, being that I'm a STEAM educator, and I know my people. So I think that is so. How do we how have you been able to handle that? Or maybe I should ask this question in a different way. Um, so considering the technical language used in STEAM, and because that it will be, the argument. They'll say STEAM, I have to teach my discipline because of the technical aspect of it. So what advice or how will you recommend or how have you helped the teachers in the STEAM to effectively integrate literacy into their curriculum, ensuring that students excel, even in the technical subjects?
Okay. Well, number one, they can't move to the technical until they have an understanding of the hierarchy of reading skills. Okay. So number one, data runs everything that you do. So if the kids have taken a diagnostic test, like I said, the two most popular ones are NWEA MAP, MAP, or it's the iReady test.
Yes.
Okay. So if they're doing one of those, they will have it all mapped out for the teacher, showing what they are proficient in, what they're not proficient in. Number one is to make sure that the teachers have an understanding of the strategies, how to teach those strategies. So that's one professional development on strategies. Number two is differentiated instruction. We can no longer say we have a one size fit all.
Sure.
Because if you have a class and over 90% of them are on different levels, you cannot teach to the whole class.
Yes.
You may give an introduction to whatever theme you're introducing, but you cannot teach because you're going to have so many kids in the classroom that are not listening to anything you're saying because number one, they don't understand it or they're too high.
Yes.
So what you want to do is differentiate the classroom, and you may have project-based activities. You may have performance type activities. So kids are doing different things according to the theme. And then I had my teachers over the years I had a college for knowledge table. And at the college for knowledge table, that's the table that I would call them back, different ones back to the table. And I would provide tier one, which is at their target, teaching those skills that's at their targeted level. So I may have, let's say I'm teaching a 7th grade class, and I have 20 kids in that class. 15 of them are not reading at grade level. So even if I started off teaching it to everyone, if we have an intellectual, I call it intellectual dialogue, I'm only going to have 5 kids that's going to interact with me. But if I put those 5 kids at their level to do different project-based activities, all kinds of things, and then I can divide the others up in different things and then pull the lowest of lowest. And from that, if it's a 7th grade classroom, I can teach these skills that I have here: phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension from their book, and just say, pull out, because they've been in school all these years. I'll say, okay, so let's look at the first page. Circle all the words that you know. And then I take out those words that they don't know, and we'll do phonics activities. There's 6 basic phonics strategies that you can teach. Patterns, closed vowel patterns, silent E patterns, and then I can go into expanding the words by teaching prefixes, suffixes, all of those from the words that's in their passage. And I tell you, in 4 weeks, I'll have them reading at grade level. because they're not reading books that's at their level, but we're extracting those things that's not at their grade level and we're breaking them down. As I said earlier, we're looking at small words and big words. So nobody may have ever told them like basket. Bass has a CBC pattern. So we know ass and ket, K-E-T, has a consonant, vowel, consonant pattern. So you look at that whole word and you look inside of it, deep inside of it, and you see the pattern, and you pull it apart, segment, and then you blend it, basket. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
If I did that every single day that they came to me, in 4 weeks, they would move to a 7th grade because I'm very intentional about doing it.
Yes.
I'm not embarrassing them. I'm making them feel good about what they're doing. And I'm giving them a systematic, explicit instructional practice that they can use every single day.
Excellent. That is pretty good. So considering the importance of early literacy, what strategy can you recommend to be employed in the preschool and kindergarten to lay a strong foundation for later STEAM learning?
Well, what I'm showing you now is this hierarchy of reading skills.
Okay, so even with the parents, I mean,
because you've got to show parents how to build that auditory system. Because if it's not built, they will not be able to hear the sounds of language.
Yeah. So can you share, just so the parents really have a good, understanding of why this is so important. Literacy is important, and not parents only. I shouldn't say parents only, but educators. How can literacy proficiency influence students' ability to pursue higher education and career in STEM field?
Well, number one, remember I said the rewiring of the brain?
Right.
That brain is not hardwired for reading. And if no one ever shows them or wire the brain, they'll never be able to read proficiently. So therefore, they can't get jobs other than a McDonald's.
Yeah.
So in my last presentation, the kids said, well, I won't ever have to read. I can go to McDonald's. And I said, well, but if you go to McDonald's, and we looked at how much they would make there, I said, you would have to have 3 or 4 jobs. Whereas if you knew how to read, you can go on to college, get a degree, and become an engineer. Many engineers make $100,000 a year. And look at what you can do. So my point is that they can't get past this. They can't get past the rewiring of the brain, the auditory part. They've got to hear the sounds. And when they look at a word, they're not looking at letters, they're looking at sounds. They're looking at patterns in words. And then when we extend it, they've got to be looking at prefixes, suffixes, root words, contractions, but that has to be systematically taught.
Yeah, so here I know and I get it. And that brings me back to, because me thinking as a STEAM teacher, I'm just thinking with everything that I know, everything you have said is so important. But it seems, I mean, when a STEAM teacher then can always look at this as that's a lot of work for me to do. I expect, by the time they get to me, that at least they will have got this, basic foundational skills. So, but that means that now I will have to start really spend a lot of my time teaching them all this basic cognitive skills. And I just don't have the time to do that. So is there some other shortcut strategy that teachers can integrate? I mean, let me put it this way: is it really doable? I mean, do you think that STEAM teachers can be able to do this within their curriculum, integrate these basic skills into their curriculum and still achieve their own, goals or standards as required by, the school system?
I'm smiling because I was just talking a few months ago with a high school group, and the
Yes.
principal was telling me the same thing that the teachers were saying. It's just too much to ask for. You know,
Yes.
they'll never be able to learn it. We just don't have time. But if a teacher, as I said, 20 kids, let's say you have only 5 kids that can do it, you would rather just look over the others and just teach to those 5 kids when you know. Oh, is that humane? That's the question I always ask. Is that humane when you know these kids are here and you know that you have a clear understanding of how this works, this hierarchy of reading skills work, and we've given you all the training, you still don't think that you could do it for humanity? And that's the question I ask you. Now, another thing the principal and I talked about was that if out of those 20, out of those 20 kids in the classroom, 5 she could differentiate, then she could have a group, but then there would be another teacher that could pull those kids out and do the hierarchy of reading skills.
Yeah.
And then they could come back in. So they'll be flowing back
I
in and
like
out, flowing back in and out.
I like that. I
I
think
can't hear you.
I believe I said I like that one.
Yeah.
Having 2 teachers within a classroom,
Yes.
co-teachers,
Yes.
right? I think that will work,
Yeah.
right?
And here's the thing. If you have and you're really trying to move the kids, let's say you have, let's say 25 kids again, that teacher who is saying, I just can't do it, she takes the 5 that she can move on with, and then I'll get 2 master literacy specialists, divide them up again, and then they would teach the hierarchy and then move them into that grade level.
Mm.
And so they would have, let's see, I'm sorry, August, September, October, November, December. They would have 5 months to have an intensive reading program that would move them. The last part of it, they would all come back in where that teacher would teach, and then they could stay in there to help support.
So will you say if you were to have a program in a school system, how long
Yes.
do you think will it take for you to be able to help teachers close the gaps?
Well, I just finished doing it at Francis Locum. It took us 1 year.
Okay.
And also I helped in there were, let's say 5 elementary schools. So
Okay.
I was a school principal, and I also was a consultant who helped the curriculum director map it out. And while I was at my school working, she was pushed into the other schools to help them.
So
And
will you say that the emphasis then shall always be more in the elementary schools?
oh,
Uh,
no, no, no.
okay.
It should be in the middle schools because we moved to the middle school, and I think it should be in high school because my last school I just helped with last 2 years ago. I
Okay.
worked at a high school to try to pull them out
Mm.
and them. But the thing about it is, but this could all be eliminated if we helped our first grade teachers understand this hierarchy and they
Mm.
took them through it. If they were finished with phonics by first grade and
Yes.
second grade, they're working on expanding words with prefixes and suffixes. There would not be a third grade gap.
Mm. Mm.
But
But
now,
then,
I'm sorry,
go ahead. Go ahead. Please go ahead.
now we have to catch up.
Yes.
But we have to have teachers of like mind. We
Yes.
have to have teachers who understand the human value.
Mm.
The human value. and help kids see who they are. Because I put in my book that everybody needs to have some place to hang their hat on.
Yes, yes, yes.
And literacy has culture to hang its hat on.
Mm.
So if you can tell kids who they are, how they got here, well, all those things about them, help them, the social structure and the governance structure is who are they within their culture.
Mm.
And then the social structure is who they are within the cultures of everybody else. And from that, you can teach literacy.
Mm.
But you always have to have something to hang your hat on.
No, I like that.
Now, it by itself is not, the hierarchy of reading skills by itself is not going to do it. So that's why I always say the science of reading plus. Because
Is that what you were doing in this video? Can you stop sharing? Let me share.
yeah,
I thought you sent me a video of whereby you were so let me see. Okay, right here. Right here.
Represent Dr. G. Offer B. Offer a storyteller writing workshops. Your children cannot move.
as an author going into schools.
K10 Liberty LaVert at Gmail.
That was a K through 6th grade school. And this is a writer's workshop.
Okay.
That parent that I was talking with and helping with some things. That's me going into I think that was a 1st grade classroom as an author. And I was reading Papa's Mark and the Barber's Cutting Edge.
Wow. Wow. I was just wondering. No, I just saw there was a clip whereby you were, yeah, right here, you were dressed in a character. So I was wondering if you're trying to meet them right where they are. So
Well, the thing about it is the librarians called me in, and that's that cultural piece.
Okay.
See, let them see other people and where they live and where they've come from and make connections and with life. So that reading aloud to kids and having those major discussions about different things, all of that falls under that hierarchy of reading skills.